Picture this. A quiet, sun-drenched California community. You know the type. Families feel safe, maybe doors aren't always locked. Then, almost overnight, that feeling shattered, replaced by this chilling, constant fear. That's the reality that hit California back in the mid-70s. A relentless, shadowy figure kicked off a crime spree that would just grip the state for over a decade. Today, we're doing a deep dive into one of America's most, frankly, terrifying murder mysteries, the Golden State Killer case. We've got a stack of sources here, forensic reports, news accounts, even some unique psychological insights. Our mission is really to piece together what happened, look hard at the facts, the evidence, and reveal the incredible technology that finally caught this guy after so long.
It really is a gripping story, though obviously a disturbing one. Our goal here is to unpack how these awful crimes evolved, understand just how massive the investigation became, and crucially explore how this incredibly complex mystery was finally solved. And, we should also touch on the bigger picture, what this case means for forensic science going forward and for, well, our privacy. That's a big one.
Okay, let's set the scene. We're talking California, 1974, switching all the way up to 1986. Over that time, one man racked up this list of aliases as his crimes changed. First, the Visalia Ransacker.
All right.
Then the East Area Rapist. Later, the original Night Stalker. And finally, the name that kind of sums it all up, the Golden State Killer.
And the sheer scale, the escalation, it's just staggering. We're talking over 120 burglaries linked to him, more than 50 rapes and 13 murders. It didn't start with murder, though. It began, relatively small burglaries in Visalia 74, 75 as the Ransacker. But then things ramped up dramatically. Sacramento area, 76, 79, he becomes the East Area Rapist, focusing on sexual assault.
A horrifying shift.
Yeah. And then late 79, it gets even darker. He escalates to murder, becoming the original Night Stalker, committing homicides down in Orange County, Santa Barbara, right up until 86.
And his methods as the East Area Rapist, they were just so planned, so chilling. He stalked middle-class neighborhoods, right, often near places he could escape easily, like schools or creeks.
Exactly. And his reconnaissance was meticulous.
Looking in windows, sometimes even going inside homes beforehand. Unlocking things, unloading guns, leaving ligatures.
Yes, preparing the scene. But the phone calls, that's something else.
Calling future victims for months, learning their routines before he even attacked. Can you imagine living with that sort of creeping dread?
It's hard to fathom. And during the attacks themselves, particularly on couples, his methods were all about terror and control. He'd usually break in, maybe a window, maybe a slider, wake people with a flashlight, a gun, then bind them, often with shoelaces or towels he'd ripped up.
And that detail about the dishes.
Oh, yeah, stacking dishes on the man's back, warning them not to move, or he'd kill everyone if they rattled. Then he'd take the woman to another room and rape her. It was purely sadistic control. And there was that one attack, 1978, where he kept saying, "I hate you, Bonnie," just chilling. What was going on in his head?
It just leaves you cold. And his crimes left such trail of trauma, even early on as the Ransacker, like the murder of Claude Snelling in Visalia, 75, trying to kidnap someone, and it ends in murder.
A sign of the violence to come.
Definitely. And then as the East Area Rapist, the brutality just grew. Think of Chris Pedretti, only 15, December 76. He tells her, "Do what I say or I'll kill you and be gone in the dark." And she later talked about the police interview, the rape kit, calling them second and third victimizations. That just highlights the trauma beyond the attack itself.
A really important point about how victims experience the aftermath.
And the violence just kept escalating. February 78, Brian and Katie Maggiore, newlyweds, just walking their dog, chased down, shot dead. Later linked to the East Area Rapist. Shows his increasing disregard for lies, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then the original Night Stalker phase. More homicides, sometimes with these signatures.
Like that knot, the Chinese diamond knot.
Exactly. Used in the March 1980 murders of Charlene and Lyman Smith. That's where the temporary name Diamond Knot Killer came from. And the victims kept mounting. Robert Offerman, Deborah Manning and Goleta, December 79. Manuela Withen, Irvine, February 81. Cherry Domingo, Gregory Sanchez, Goleta, July 81, and then Janelle Cruz, Irvine, May 86.
Yeah.
These aren't just names on a list. They represent this wave of terror moving across the state.
And the psychological impact on whole communities.
Yeah.
Must have been massive.
Oh, huge. Gun sales went up, locks sold out everywhere, women taking self-defense classes. It wasn't just the physical threat, it was the mental game. Those phone calls, even written notes like that creepy Excitement's Crave poem, or threatening to kill 2 people tonight if victims talk to the press. Imagine that fear hanging over you. People were terrified.
Just constant fear. And for years, decades even, nobody connected all these dots, right? These different crimes across different areas.
That's right. They were seen as separate sprees, separate monsters. It took DNA much later to finally tie it all together to realize it was one person.
So why did it take so long? You mentioned the lack of DNA tech back then.
Yeah, exactly. In the 70s, forensics was, well, pretty basic compared to now. Fingerprints, maybe some blood typing, sketches, that was about it. No DNA databases like CODIS. And another huge hurdle was the statute of limitations for rape in California at the time, just 3 years. So even if they had identified him earlier for the rapes, prosecuting many of them would have been impossible.
So frustrating for investigators. It really was a cold case for decades, wasn't it? Lots of suspects looked at, then cleared.
Absolutely. People like Brett Glasby, Paul Schneider, Joe Alsip, Gregory Gonzalez investigated, DNA tested maybe later on, or they had solid alibis. Just a painstaking process of elimination over years and years.
Until 2001. That was the big moment, wasn't it?
That was the crucial turning point, yes. DNA evidence finally definitively linked the East Area rapist crimes up north with the original Night Stalker murders down south. Huge breakthrough, confirmation, one guy. That's when the Golden State Killer identity really solidified.
Okay, so now they know it's one person. They have his DNA profile, but still no match in the criminal databases, right? What happens next? This is where the really innovative stuff comes in.
Right. Traditional DNA analysis, the kind used for CODIS, is called STR analysis, short tandem repeat. Think of it like looking for an exact match to a specific short pattern in the DNA. It's super accurate odds of a random match are billions to one.
But if the person's DNA isn't in the database,
Then STR doesn't help you find them. And that was the problem for 40 years with the Golden State Killer. His DNA wasn't in NDIS, the national database. They needed a totally different angle.
so what was this different angle? You mentioned it was more like those ancestry services.
Exactly, forensic genealogical searching. And luckily, they had some remarkably well-preserved DNA evidence from one of the crime scenes, a 1980 double murder. That was key.
Okay, so how does that work differently?
Instead of STRs, they used SNP analysis, single nucleotide polymorphism. SNP testing looks at variations at hundreds of thousands, even millions of individual points across your entire genome. It's much, much better for finding relatives, even distant ones like third or fourth cousins. It allows you to build out family trees.
Okay, so they had this SNP profile from the crime scene DNA. What did they do with it?
This was the game changer. They uploaded that profile to an open-source genealogy website called GEDmatch. GEDmatch allows users to upload their own DNA data from consumer tests to find relatives, so investigators could compare the killer's profile against, at the time, maybe 900,000 other profiles uploaded by ordinary people looking for family connections.
Wow, so they weren't looking for the killer directly, but for his relatives?
Precisely. Once they found people who shared significant amounts of DNA, indicating they were distant cousins, maybe third or fourth cousins, they started building family trees. Really extensive trees, sometimes going back generations. They used public records, obituaries, social media, traditional genealogy work. Then they combined that with known facts about the killer probable age range, locations of the crimes, the fact he was male to narrow it down. Finding where the maternal and paternal lines eventually converged was critical.
Incredible detective work combining cutting-edge science with old-school genealogy.
It really was. And eventually, that process pointed towards one man, Joseph James DeAngelo.
So they have a name. What's the final step to confirm it?
Classic surveillance. They watched him. And then they needed his DNA for a direct comparison. They managed to collect what's called abandoned DNA, a tissue he discarded, maybe a sample swab from his car door handle, things he threw away in public.
And legally, you don't have a right to privacy for stuff you've thrown away like that.
Generally, no. It's considered abandoned. And that sample? It was a direct match to the DNA left at the crime scenes decades earlier. That led to his arrest on April 24th, 2018. Finally.
Just incredible. And then the details about DeAngelo himself started coming out. And it was shocking. He was a cop.
A former police officer, yes. Worked in Auburn and Exeter in the 70s.
Which just makes you think. His knowledge of police procedures, how investigations worked, that must have helped him avoid capture for so long.
Almost certainly. It raises difficult questions, too, like whether law enforcement personnel should have mandatory DNA samples on file for elimination purposes.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So how did the legal process play out after his arrest? Did he confess?
He did, eventually. He pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and 13 counts of kidnapping related to robbery. Importantly, as part of that plea, he also admitted the conduct underlying dozens of other crimes, including over 50 rapes for which the statute of limitations had long expired. The plea deal allowed him to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life without parole.
And he said something quite chilling during the interrogation, didn't he?
Yes, it was widely reported. He said something like, I didn't have the strength to push him out. He made me. He went with me. It was like in my head. He's a part of me.
Yeah?
He referred to this other part of himself, Jerry. He continued, I didn't want to do those things. I pushed Jerry out and had a happy life. I did all those things. I destroyed all their lives. So now I've got to pay the price.
Wow. It sounds like, I don't know, a bizarre attempt to distance himself from his own actions. But the impact on the victims, the court statements must have been incredibly powerful.
They were profoundly moving. Hearing from survivors like Chris Pedretti, her words were just devastating. She said directly to him, you stole my innocence, my security, threatened my life. I was 13 years old. My world was small, predictable, and safe. It really brought home the lifelong trauma, but also, for many, a sense of collective healing and finally seeing justice, however late.
It makes you wonder, what makes someone do things like this? Our sources mentioned a psychological case study, SK005. Not DeAngelo specifically, right? But a general study.
Right. It's important to clarify this wasn't about DeAngelo directly, but a general case study using a biopsychosocial developmental timeline approach to understand serial offenders. It looks at everything from birth through conviction, trying to identify patterns or contributing factors, biological, psychological, social, the whole picture.
Yeah, and what kind of factors did that study highlight?
Well, in that specific case, SK005, they noted things like severe early childhood trauma, head injuries, being rammed head into walls at age 4 or 5, also prolonged physical abuse, sexual abuse starting very young, and really early onset of psychological issues, depressive symptoms, even homicidal thoughts reported from age 7, early substance use too.
Age 7? That's incredibly young.
It is. And the study showed a clear progression. Antisocial behavior starting around 10, escalating through teenage years into adulthood, burglaries, robberies. Often there was a concentration of aggressive outbursts, frequently linked to heavy alcohol and drug use, right before the homicides began. Again, this is the general case study, not DeAngelo, but it paints a picture of how these devastating paths can develop.
Which brings us back to the method used to catch him, forensic genealogy. It worked, but it raises huge ethical questions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's this constant balancing act between public safety, catching dangerous criminals, solving cold cases, and individual genetic privacy. People upload their DNA to find relatives, not necessarily to help police investigations.
So it's about proportionality, trying to maximize the good while minimizing the harm.
Exactly. The idea is that using it for, say, very serious violent crimes like murder or serial rape might be considered proportionate, whereas using it for minor property crimes probably wouldn't be. But where do you draw that line? And it's not just the suspect's privacy, but the privacy of all their relatives whose DNA might be searched in these databases.
And the whole informed consent issue is key here, isn't it? When you spit in that tube for an ancestry test, do you fully realize your data might end up being used by law enforcement?
While the law might say discarded DNA has no privacy expectation, using data voluntarily submitted by relatives feels different to a lot of people. It's a debate that's definitely still ongoing.
So wrapping up, the Golden State Killer case. It's just a stark example of how powerful forensic genealogy can be. It cracked a case that seemed utterly unsolvable for decades. It brought justice, finally, to so many victims and their families. That's undeniable.
Undeniable. But, as we've discussed, these groundbreaking methods really do push the boundaries. They force us to ask tough questions about privacy, about consent, about who gets access to our most fundamental biological information, and why.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? As science keeps racing ahead, making our genetic blueprints more and more accessible, how do we, as a society, strike that balance? How do we ensure we can pursue justice for the most terrible crimes while still protecting the fundamental privacy and rights of everyone? That's the question we're all grappling with now.
That's it from us today. This is Lisa and Jim signing off from Pod Talk. Hope you all have an informative session. Please like and subscribe for more such sessions. We hope to see you soon with a brand new topic of discussion.